it is really important that manufacturers make sure that their product is well tested, that there is acceptance amongst people reducing meat, not only vegans or vegetarians, but say flexitarians, to make sure that the experience is good and that people come back again and again and again. And I think that that is really important. Plant-based options need to emulate meat, and they're not going to be exactly the same, but they certainly need to taste really good, similar or just different but great. And I think they do need to be consumer tested, so that we can get, the general public saying plant-based meat actually really good and my kids love it and I'm going back for more.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of ProVeg Talks, where in this series we'll explore how to grow, scale and succeed in the world of plant-based food. I'm Gemma Tadman and today we're focusing on plant-based food for children and families. Plant-based eating has made significant strides among adults, but family and children's markets remain challenging. In this episode, we'll explore how brands, retailers, and food service providers can better reach, appeal to, and nourish the next generation of plant-based eaters. Today's guest, Tammy Fry, co-founder of the Fry Family Food Co. and general manager of the ANZ Region for the LIVEKIndly Collective, brings deep expertise as a business leader, parent, and advocate for healthy, accessible plant-based eating. We'll explore more about the top priorities for parents when it comes to feeding their families and practical strategies for brands and operators when it comes to developing plant-based foods for kids. Let's dive in. Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gemma. It's a real honor to be here chatting with you and just sharing all my plant-based experiences.
So to kick things off, could you just share a little bit about your personal journey with plant-based food and, how that led to the founding and evolution of Fry's Family Foods? I'd love to hear, how your family's experience has shaped your own perspective on plant-based eating for, all generations.
Yeah, of course. So my plant-based journey started when I was really young. I probably made the decision that I didn't know was going to shape the rest of my life when I was maybe a year or two old. My father was a livestock trader, so that's he would sell goats for a living. So I was exposed to livestock animals from a young age, and I really grew to love them. And I think I saw animals not just as food, but living beings, cool personalities, individual qualities, and I think I saw them as sentient even as a very young person. And I think a lot of children are like that. I just think that they're taught differently and they're exposed to different things. And then I realized that I just couldn't eat animals. Luckily, my mum was also a born vegetarian. So I had one person on my side. And my dad accepted my decision as well. But I think he had, some concerns, and I think some of which we might unpack later about raising a child on a vegetarian diet. And back then, it was maybe 1982, vegetarian children or even vegetarian diets were almost unheard of. And then my dad left the goat trading industry and started a construction business. And we moved off the farm and into the city, and he became very successful in that new endeavor. And as he built up his business, he was eventually commissioned to build a piggery, a 4,000 sow piggery. And he was really proud of what he had built. And when he went back to see the operation, I think it was such a shock. And I think that came as his epiphany moment, where he too joined my mum and I and also became a vegetarian. So now there's three of us. And back then, eating plant-based, of course, it wasn't easy. Anyone who knows, especially in South Africa, where the meat-eating culture was so strong, there was no vegetarian sausages, burgers, things on supermarket shelves. We were very much, I would say, in the closet vegetarians, because you didn't talk about being a vegetarian without being, hit with a lot of judgments. And so my dad started experimenting in our kitchen at home making these plant-based meats purely to help us as a family to fit into the sort of cultural experiences. Like we have a cultural cooking moment, which is a braai or a barbecue. And it was such a big thing, and people came around and cooked meat over the fire. And we were like eating salad at the table at the back, and he wanted to have something to replace meat, like plant-based versions of the food we liked, allowing us to fit into those sort of cultural norms. And yeah, he was just buying the ingredients at the health food store and making these things at home. And people started asking questions about like these vegetarian sausages, that we would go to a barbecue and someone would try one and say, oh wow, this is really good, I wouldn't mind. I actually have been dabbling a little bit in vegetarianism as well. And so it kind of, the bubble just grew, and we Fry's Family Food Co. was kind of born at that moment. So it was initially just for us. It was never a commercial enterprise. There were very, very few vegans, or just a handful of vegetarians in South Africa. And so it wasn't a commercial endeavor. It was just to help other people to make that transition and do it easily. And that's essentially where it started. And now, of course, Fry's is a global brand, and I think it's helped possibly millions of people eat more consciously and more compassionately and more deliciously. So it's been quite a journey, and become like really a great story as well.
That's so amazing. I mean, it's clear that plant-based eating has been such a big part of your family story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just, this business grew out of real passion for everything associated with the lifestyle. And we became our own consumers, customers. And so I think we became really adept at knowing what the consumer wanted, because we were the consumer. So a lot of products that we've developed over the years have actually come out of our own needs as a family. Even the gluten-free products that we developed, they came after my niece was born, and she was gluten intolerant. And then we were like, well, we're going to need gluten-free products for her. And so we developed them. So it's kind of grown with our family. So it's quite interesting how the products have changed as the family's grown, and there's grandchildren. And then, we launch popcorn chicken because we know they'll like. And so it's actually like a reflection of who we are as well as people.
I love your popcorn chicken. It's great.
Real treat.
It is. So you're now running the ANZ and region of LIVEKINDLY Collective, who owns Fry's. And in fact, this year was Fry's 25th anniversary in Australia. So, that's quite a milestone. What do you think has been the driver of Fry's longevity in Australia?
I think creating family-friendly food that tastes good, is nutritious. I mean, when we buy the ingredients, we're not just buying ingredients for commercial business. We're buying them and we're going to eat them. So we're pretty fussy about what type of ingredients we choose to buy and that we choose to put in our food. And I think that that's built a lot of trust over the years with our consumers. And then, accessibility across multiple categories in all of the major retailers and the independent markets. So just having that distribution and availability and accessibility for people who want to eat less meat or no meat. And having the consumer support, of course. I mean, without the consumers supporting us and coming back to buy our products again and again and again, we would never have achieved that 25-year milestone. And the support of the retailers, because they've backed plant-based as much as I know the plant-based community would like to see more, but they have got behind the plant-based movement, and they've grown as it's grown, and they've kind of consolidated as it's fallen off and adjusted. So we've had their support as well. So I think all of those things have helped us to achieve that 25-year milestone.
Brilliant. Turning to the broader market now, you've obviously long been a passionate advocate for plant-based eating in the family. From your perspective, why has the children and family segment had a slightly slower plant-based uptake compared to adults, which is obviously really, really thriving?
Yeah, I'm a parent myself. I've got two teenage boys now. And parents are very cautious when it comes to their kids' nutrition. I think there's a real deep sense of responsibility there in choosing what you're going to feed your kids. And I think the old belief systems still prevail, that people or parents think that their children need animal products for protein and calcium and iron. And I think they worry that perhaps or aren't sure if the plant-based diets can provide these nutrients. And if they do, are not really sure how to swap one for the other to meet those nutritional requirements. So like if I cut out meat totally and I feed my kids fries, nuggets, tofu, beans, how much do I need? How many, and all of those questions come up. And parents are busy, so they don't have a lot of time to think about that. So I think that's one thing. And then, of course, we've got picky eaters. Kids are super fussy. And I think sometimes just about feeding them and, just get them fed, make sure they're full. You don't want to try new things because it might not work. And then there's the institutions, I think, like daycares and schools that don't necessarily cater or provide a wide enough variety for those easy swaps to swap, meat for something else. And kids don't really want to swap, hot dogs for dal, or popcorn chicken for a salad. That's just that for them. It doesn't add up. It's not fair. And then kids don't want to be seen to be different than their peers. I know that's a big thing with teenagers. They want to fit in. They don't want to be eating something different than everybody else is eating. They don't want to go to Macca's, which kids do, and not eat a packet of chips and the friends are all having a burger. So they want to fit and they want to do what their friends are doing. So I think that all of those factors have made it slower for children, to get that plant-based uptake than adults.
Taking this a little bit further then, when parents, hesitate about plant-based options for their kids, what are
Yeah.
some of the biggest fears or misconceptions that you encounter?
Well, obviously the one thing is my kids may not grow as quickly as their peers who eat meat. I never had this. Like I personally never had this because I've got a 16-year-old who's 6'2". He's always bigger than all of his peers by a head. So I never heard this personally because it was just, obvious that he was thriving. But I know that misconception exists. And then, of course, there's the confusion around soy for boys. And I think there's a lot of conflicting information, and it's difficult for parents to find the truth. I mean, of course, it is incorrect that children don't grow as fast if they're on a plant-based diet. And I'll quote the American Academy of Pediatrics and British Dietetic Association stated that a well-planned vegetarian and vegan diet is appropriate for all stages of life, including childhood. And there was a second study done, a Canadian study in 2021 of over 8,000 children aged between 6 months and 8 years old that found that average height and weight were similar between plant-based and omnivore children. So, the studies are there. It's safe. Making sure that your children are eating a well-balanced diet is important, of course, whether they're eating meat or that they're on a plant-based diet. It's as important for both diets. Just simply swapping meat for plant-based meat is a very easy way to do it because you're getting all your essential amino acids. Don't have to think too hard. And most dairy alternatives have been fortified with calcium, vitamin D. So if you're worried about dropping out dairy, the simple swap often makes it easier than trying to think about like if you need to take supplements and what you need to do. And then the soy misconception, I mean, that's been around for a very long time, and it's totally wrong. And for those people and those listeners who aren't aware, there are isoflavones in soy or phytoestrogens, and they have a similar structure to estrogen, but they don't behave in the same way as a human estrogen, and they do not affect testosterone levels in children. They don't affect puberty or fertility. And there have been numerous studies done on children as well, and they have found that there's absolutely no change in hormonal levels in men or boys, and there's no effect on growth or development either. So soy is actually a great substitute because it has got all essential amino acids, it's high in fiber, it's got calcium. So it's a really great way to actually drop out meat and, have something that's a simple, easy way to swap it out with. So I think those are the two major misconceptions that I hear the most of.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all of that information. It's so useful to hear, I think, for business owners and for parents listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a mum, I totally get it because I've got boys myself. So, there's been moments where I'll read something and I'll get worried and say, well, is that fact? Or, or the kids will follow a key influencer or TikToker that was like, will just put out information which is so incorrect and is not supported by sound peer-reviewed studies, and it's really wrong in so many ways. And I think what people don't do is they often criticize one diet, but they don't look at their existing diets and wonder what's bad about that. What is it about meat sausages? What is it about meat burgers? What is it about dairy that might not be good for you either? So, eating plant-based meat is not whole foods, and it's not the apple that fell off the organic tree. I get that, and I agree with that. But in terms of what is better, is it better to eat a plant-based hot dog, or is it better to eat a meat hot dog? And every day of the week, I'm going to tell you it's better to eat a plant-based hot dog. So I think it's about comparing like for like rather than the expectation that a plant-based diet is going to be pure and, you're just going to eat lots of organic vegetables. That is not how most people and families are following their plant-based lifestyle or diet. That's not how they're doing it. So
yeah, all very valid points there. And it's so important to, like you say, like cut through all the misinformation that's out at the moment because there is a lot of it and it's really hard to listen to it and to believe it. But if you don't actually also seek out information that kind of helps to understand it and educate yourself, then you'll never know.
absolutely. Yeah, that's so true.
So what have you found to be, the top priorities for parents when choosing food for their children, and how do plant-based options sometimes meet or miss these expectations?
I think the first thing is acceptance. Like, will my family eat this? And I think that, with the explosion of plant-based meat alternatives, we've definitely seen a hit and miss on taste and texture with some of the products that have been launched. And, I think that it is really important that manufacturers make sure that their product is well tested, that there is acceptance amongst people reducing meat, not only vegans or vegetarians, but say flexitarians, to make sure that the experience is good and that people come back again and again and again. And I think that is really important. Plant-based options need to emulate meat, and they're not going to be exactly the same, but they certainly need to taste really good, similar, or just different but great. And I think they do need to be consumer tested, so that we can get, the general public saying plant-based meat is actually really good, and my kids love it, and I'm going back for more.
In a similar vein, then, when it comes to kids specifically, how important is familiarity versus introducing new flavors and formats?
Yeah, familiarity is really important. Children like what they've been eating. They're not that they don't. They are there's of course there's always exceptions to the rule, but they like to eat what their friends are eating. They don't like new experiences. So I think familiarity is probably one of the most important things when developing food for children. Um, we've taken that quite seriously. So, we've launched the popcorn chicken. We actually did a collaboration last year with Aardman and Netflix with the chicken run nuggets. So, just creating something that's fun for kids to be involved. So that children that are following a plant-based diet or are dabbling or flexitarian are still having a fun, exciting experience and enjoying it. Just like, omnivores. So I think having those familiar experiences, burgers, sausages, hot dogs, sausage rolls, these are all the types of products that we've created. Ultimately, our brand exists to help people to transition away from meat. And so if that's our purpose, that's what we need to, those are the kind of products that we need to put into the world and develop and innovate.
Absolutely. And do you think there's, a generational shift happening among parents themselves that's starting to influence how families eat?
Um, I definitely think so. I know that we've had a soft spot on the plant-based market in the past 2 years. Um, and I have some ideas of why that is. But I still think that consciousness is growing. And I think parents are more educated and exposed to animal cruelty, environmental awareness, health and wellness. We're seeing all these documentaries on Netflix, which I think have been um, absolutely, pivotal for plant-based as a movement. So everyone the people that have been involved with that, that's been incredible advocacy for plant-based. And I think the exposure to more variety in the supermarkets has allowed people to start dabbling, and starting their journey to eating more consciously. So I do think that there's a generational shift. Whether that's transferred to children is another question. I don't think it's quite there yet, but I think that adults are definitely, adopting a flexitarian diet. You're hearing that more and more. Just cutting back meat, not necessarily going, all in on vegan, but starting to cut back once a week, twice a week, 3 times. And I think that process you'll just see it growing and moving forward, and people enjoying that learning phase. I think it also, as they start to cook and make plant-based options once or twice a week, they get better at knowing what to cook, how to cook it, a little bit more education and kind of layers up from there.
In a similar vein, then, are there key age stages where, introducing plant-based options is easier or more difficult among children?
I mean, as young as possible, I think. Um, as soon as a child starts to eat solid food, I think that they should be exposed to plant-based options, because then there'll be better acceptance later on. We do see also a higher uptake with teenage girls, as they start to, as they hit puberty and as they start to develop their own interests and own ideas. I think we're starting to see a lot of younger girls moving towards a plant-based diet as well.
Let's take a look at some, practical strategies for brands and product developers. Based on your experience at Fry's, what have been your biggest lessons in developing successful plant-based products for families?
Number one, tasty. They have to taste good. If people don't like them, they're never going to buy them again, and the product will fail. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely critical. And then convenience. No one has time to spend an hour cooking every night. There are a few people, but they're lucky. The rest of us are working, and you've got 10 minutes to get a meal on the table. So I think, you know, developing products that can be cooked in air fryers are like 5 minutes to cook. The ingredients are also quite helpful, just so that people can easy swap. And even if they're cooking for a whole family, being able to cook a meat dish and a vegetarian or plant-based dish um, makes it a lot easier. I'm thinking like spaghetti bolognese. You can have your sauce, you can cook your meat mince, you can cook your vegan mince, and then you can just add that at the end and give the family that choice without it being too difficult. So it's really, really simple way to do it. So having those easy swaps is critical. And and I think just making this like a super easy process for people, a super easy, accessible, tasty process. I think that's the key.
Absolutely. And it's important, to encourage healthy eating from a young age. But as you mentioned, time can be short in the week and children can be fussy.
Yeah.
How should, brands balance health messaging with the reality that taste and convenience often drive busy, family food choices?
Um, yeah. I think that it is very important for brands to include health message. I mean, we do. I think they all do. I don't think that there is a plant-based product on the market that doesn't have a health claim, like a high in protein or a fortified with or a high in fiber or some form of health messaging. I think it does. People generally do consider themselves first, although they may be environmentally conscious. They still want something that's good for them. So that I think health messaging is important. And again, comparing it to what is also important. It's better than, but ultimately a whole food unprocessed diet might be the best, might be the optimal, might be the goal. But how do we do this easily and with good products? So I think, putting it into perspective is also important.
From a marketing perspective, what tone and messaging tends to work best when messaging and speaking to families about plant-based foods, without making them feel overwhelmed or judged?
Um, I mean, I think a lot of people listening to the podcast might be vegan or plant-based themselves, and I think all of us have become better and better at becoming advocates for plant-based, and we know that people find it difficult to make the transition. And I think giving people having empathy for that process, not judging, and promoting one small change at a time. As frustrating as that can be, because you want everyone to change tomorrow,
Yeah.
like this is urgent, you've got to do this like straight away. But I think that the softer approach, the gentler approach, and just helping people with ideas. I cooked this recipe, it was really tasty. Buying them your favorite plant-based product and letting them try it. I mean, there isn't a cooking. I never go to somebody's house for dinner without taking a box of fries, like the sausage rolls, because I know people like the sausage rolls. I send sausage rolls with my kids to school. When they were younger, they used to take them to school, and they would like trade them. So they would trade them for junk food.
Amazing.
I would get junk food wrappers back in the lunchbox, and they would have traded the sausage rolls. But doing little things like that,
Yeah.
I ended up with parents coming to me to say, "Oh my gosh, my kid loves your sausage rolls.
Oh.
We buy them." They're not necessarily, those people are omnivores, but they are starting to dabble, and they're not even thinking about it unconsciously in plant-based. And I think breaking down that barrier and making it just an easy transition, I think that kind of tone is probably the best, I would say.
Looking at examples of success in the market, can you share a product example where, Fry Family Foods has excelled in engaging the family market and what makes it work?
I think we have a few products that have been very, very successful. Of course, the nuggets. and the gluten-free nuggets. I mean, both of those products are sold globally in all of our markets and have been selling well for years. And then, of course, we've got some of our old favorites, like I mentioned, the sausage rolls again. Really great flexitarian kind of offer, fantastic for kids and their lunch boxes or to take to work. So those kind of products have, and the hot dogs, I mean, especially in the UK and Australia, the hot dogs have been super successful. I mean, I really love our hot dogs. I think they're like really good. And I've tested especially the smoked hot dogs. We've had chefs try them versus meat, and they're struggling to tell the difference, which means we've got like the taste and texture right. So if somebody can swap, if a mum can swap out a plant-based hot dog for, say, a meat hot dog, but not sacrifice anything in terms of taste and texture, but get a lot more benefit and nutrition, then why would they not? So I think that those products have been successful, in that family market.
Moving on to opportunities for broader change, beyond supermarkets, where do you see the biggest opportunity to reach families with plant-based options?
Um, I think in canteen, like in the food service market, where people are getting the opportunity to try, uh, and without making there's never a big financial commitment, but without having to buy a box of burgers or a box of sausages, at a canteen, being able to try the plant-based offer. So I think that having the plant-based products in those settings would be that would be a great opportunity for sure. School tuck shops, universities. I think universities are huge as well. When kids leave school and start to make their own decisions and then have the opportunity to try new things, I think uni students are very open to that. Hospitals, all of those kind of settings, and those food service customers. I think that's a fantastic opportunity.
So we're nearing the end of our conversation now. But before we close, I'd love to, look towards the future with you. In your view, what would a truly plant-forward family food culture look like in 10 years or so time?
I think seeing plant-based as fully interchangeable with animal-based. So it not being this is plant-based or that's animal-based. It's just the protein. And not people not even realizing that, they had 3 days plant-based, 4 days omnivore, whatever. They were just, eating various types of protein. The same way that people don't think much about the difference between eating chicken or beef. I would like to see in 10 years' time people not seeing the difference between eating plant-based chicken or plant-based beef or plant-based fish. So it would just be all protein, and choosing which protein you prefer on that day. So I think that fully interchangeable moment would be incredible. I think that's what I'd like to see.
Amazing. And in what role do you see food companies, so like Fry's, for example, playing not just in business growth, but in shaping healthier, more sustainable food norms for families globally?
Um, I think it all comes down to innovation, improving the flavors, putting pressure on the suppliers for increased sustainability, you cleaning up the ingredients, finding alternatives, and just growing as an industry in our innovation process. And I think we can play a major role in doing all of those things, healthier, more sustainable products and bringing them to markets globally. It's what we all do now. I know that there are all the brands that are in this space are pushing for improvements. If you aren't, you would be being left behind, using different types of proteins from different legumes and, using those and bringing them to market. And we've got a pea-based protein mince. And I think it's about really just progressing in that innovation. Although we've been in this category for 38 years or so, since 1991, 35 years. We've been here and we've been doing it, but there's always room for growth and improvements. And I think that's what we focus on as a company, is how can we be better every year? How can we improve? How can we improve our innovation? How can we bring better products? And we're pushing that forward all the time.
Thank you. And my final question, what gives you hope and optimism about the future of plant-based eating among children and families?
Well, when I was at school, I was at all-girls school. I think there was 1,000 girls. I was the only vegetarian. So it was me. And I remember going to Christian education, you have Christian studies, and all of the girls like rallied around me and they put their hands on me and they were praying for me. And I had no idea why I was being prayed for, but I was confused. And the teacher and the girls had said to me, they're praying because, you're a vegetarian and it's against the principles of the Bible. Now that doesn't feel, I am quite old, but it doesn't feel that long ago that was my experience. And now when I go to schools to speak about plant-based or meat-free Mondays or, doing public speaking, and I ask the kids, how many of you, would say that you're vegetarian or follow plant-based diets? I'm seeing 20% of kids put their hands up. And Even if they're just associating, they're not embarrassed to associate. Yeah. And I think that is super exciting to see that there's been such a big shift. So that makes me feel optimistic. If that's the change since I was at school to now, then what does it look like in the next 20 years? What are we going to see in the next 20? Could that be half the kids? So that, I think, was just as a personal anecdote, has been huge.
Well, that's amazing. What a positive note to end on. I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tammy. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on here today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you, Gemma. Thanks so much for your time as well.
Listeners can find out more about Tammy's work on her LinkedIn, which I'll pop in the show notes, along with the Fry's and Live Kindly websites. For more support on your alternative protein strategy, head to the New Food Hub, get in touch with our experts, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for listening.